Welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your hosts, Buddy Sotello Esquire and Evan Ginzburg. And Evan Ginzburg, would you please introduce our legendary gentleman here tonight?
Absolutely. My buddies from Calgary. We have historian, radio host from Calgary Stampede, Bob Johnson, as well as the great revolutionary figure in pro wrestling, Bruce Hart. How are you gentlemen doing today?
I'm doing good. I hope you guys are all doing well, especially with all this corona nonsense going on. But
oh my God. I've had 18 friends get it, 3 hospitalized, 1 intubated, 1 dead. It's no joke in New York. It's actually better now, but it's
not rough. A joke here in California. I'll tell you that much. We're having record high numbers of people right here in my very county. And I'm where you were at, Evan, a couple months ago. Yeah, I'm feeling that fear too. And I was scared for you then. And I know that it's brutal now. I just hope we can keep from, me or my family coming down with it at all either.
I'm not leaving the house until 2027. I'm okay.
Yeah, well, part of that's one of the reasons why this whole Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast, and now another coast involved here, or, at least moving outside of the United States. This is your first international, truly international stars that we've been able to interview. And I'm very humbled to have you on our show, Mr. Hart. I really believe that what you've done for wrestling is something that, will probably never be duplicated or brought back. And you hearken to an era, and you were a significant part of an era that I think most people think of as the best age of wrestling that ever existed. So you have that from the bottom of my heart. Can you tell me how you first got involved in wrestling? What was the very first thing that, when you were young, influenced you to be involved in pro wrestling?
What's that?
What influenced you when you got into pro wrestling?
I think I just grew up with it. It was sort of like from when I was a little kid, I was exposed to it and around it, and it was sort of a regular part of our daily lives. It almost kind of there were some awesome guys. My dad had a bunch of really legendary talents, like the Luther Lindsays and the George Gordiankos and the Bill Millers and the Dorian Terry Funk and all, and it kind of was attractive to me. Though I was fascinated by it, and endeavored to kind of learn and kind of involve myself as much as I could in every aspect. From being a wrestler to a trainer to a booker or whatever.
Did you ever think you would become such a legend, that you would have such an amazing influence on the history of wrestling?
Not at all. When I was a kid, it was a struggle to survive at times, and back in the day, just the business being what it was, and there was a lot of trials and tribulations, and for a while my dad was out of it, and so I never ever in my wildest dreams anticipated it would kind of become what it became, what with the WWE and all like that. But it's fascinating kind of evolution nonetheless.
But did you think that you yourself would be such a big part of it, that you and your family would be one of the true legendary families in pro wrestling?
It's kind of funny because my dad was kind of a legend or a larger than life type figure when I was a kid growing up. He had a lot of kind of admirers, and the dungeon and all like that had kind of a legendary aura about it. But I never really anticipated ever being anywhere near as well known globally. You know, in part, I have to give credit to Vince McMahon for that, even though I'm not always on the same page or not always condoning or endorsing a lot of the things he's done. I nonetheless, I guess have to acknowledge that he did put the Hart family on the global stage, I guess, so that's something that I must acknowledge.
What would be some of your favorite matches that you've seen your family involved in? What are to you some of the things that you look back on?
It's funny, we did some of those gigs at WrestleMania and Survivor Series, and having said that, that was by no means anything I was overly enthralled with or, proud of. It's more of a, for want of a better term, kind of a illicit gong show. I didn't think that it was really necessarily doing us justice, but I did a lot of things out here that I was really proud of, if only because, I had to kind of go to great lengths. I wasn't always on the same page as my dad as far as methodology. He was kind of old school, and, he was kind of into a lot of these precepts like the old shooters and that kind of stuff. And I always respected that, but I think when I started booking in the early 80s, I was advocating smaller, faster, people like Dynamite Kid and Davey Boy and Bret and some of that. And so I wasn't always on the same page as Stu, but I nonetheless took a lot of pride in that because in its own way, it was kind of revolutionary, and it kind of ultimately had a big influence on Japan and other parts of the world. Some of the people we had in here, Dynamite Kid and Bret and Davey Boy and some of the Japanese guys were kind of the cutting edge, and I took a lot of pride in maybe having been to some degree the impetus for that out here.
And Bob Johnson, tell us a little about your getting into the business and your role in the business.
Yeah, that was an interesting thing, Evan. Back in the late 70s, I was a manager of a cinema company here in Calgary. We had a show called Paradise Alley, and Sylvester Stallone, Terry Funk, and I think it was one of the very first wrestling movies. And those days there was no, I don't even think the DVDs or video cassettes or anything was out. But anyway, we wanted to promote this wrestling movie. And I had a bit of a background. I'm from a place called Winnipeg, and I used to be associated a bit with the old AWA back in Winnipeg. So I knew a few of the guys in Winnipeg, but I moved out to Calgary, and I really didn't follow the Stampede that much, but I knew about it. So the management at the theaters told me, can you maybe contact Stu Hart and see if we can do a promotion. We'll do a cross promotion. And of course, those days, the Stampede Wrestling is on a Friday night, the hottest night for Stampede Wrestling. And that's also the same. The Friday night was our hot night for movies. But anyway, regardless, I got on the bus. I didn't have a car. I went over to Stu Hart's house, and I got to meet all his sons, including Bruce and many of the daughters, and I got totally welcomed to the home. And so it ended up that Stu and I did a cross promotion, and I said, now, if I can put a few posters up in Stampede Wrestling about this movie, can maybe you guys can cross promote with me. And so one thing led to another, and I said, oh, by the way, what nights do you guys get? When I talked to Bruce and Smith, his brother, and a couple of the other brothers, and I said, what nights do you get off? And they said, we're off Saturday night. And I said, Sunday night, that was their night off. So I said, if you feel like bringing you guys down, if you take care of my staff at Stampede Wrestling, I'll take care of your wrestlers on Sunday night, regardless. So I had a parade of every wrestler in the territory and all the family and Stu and Helen, and they all came down to my theater, and that was a start of a great friendship, and that's how I got involved with the Hearts. And then I eventually, one time I was working in the theater and at another theater, and they needed an announcer up in a place called Red Deer that's north of town. The guy had laryngitis, and they said, Bob, you got the night off. Can you come up and announce? So that was my first stint of announcing. And then had a bit of a falling out with the theater business, and I went to work for Stu when they started up in 85, 86. So it's been a great relationship.
You're just lining up towns.
Yeah, my job.
Putting up posters.
I've never wrestled in my life. I'm not an athlete like Bruce, but I said there's got to be an easier way to do a body slam. So I'll do the publicity. So Stu said, we'd like you to do what they call spot shows. And I had all of Western Canada, and I've been all over. There's a place called Saskatchewan that's about the size of Texas, or Nebraska, and then I went to every small town promoting. And we did incredible business. Saskatchewan, Alberta, British Columbia, Montana, the Northwest Territories, and British Columbia, and everything. So it was a lot of fun. I did that for a lot of years, and I'm still involved. Bruce and I started doing Heartbeat Radio about 6 or 7 years ago, and Bruce and
they froze up.
Oh no! Well, we are experiencing the dreaded technical difficulties. Oh, they have dropped out. So hold on while I try to get them again here.
And while you do that, I'll chatter a bit. I just want to remind everybody to check out 350 Days, starring superstar Billy Graham and Bret Hart from the legendary Hart family, and that's available on iTunes, Amazon Prime, anywhere. You can find it pretty much anywhere. All major cable systems worldwide. 350 Days. themovie.com. You could also check out Wrestling Then and Now on Amazon Prime with Nikolai Volkov, Killer Kowalski, Don, Dr. Death Arnold, Homicide, and many others. That's Wrestling Then and Now, Amazon.
Hold on. I believe that we have been disconnected, so I will actually stop the recording at this point. All right? So
started involved with the Hart family, and I became longtime friends with that family, and I've been to all the weddings and everything in that family. And Stu and Helen they're just such great people, and it's been the greatest relationship I've ever personally had. But I'm not going to talk about myself anymore. I'm just going to turn it back to Bruce. Like I say, if we never had that show Paradise Alley, I would have never got to know Bruce Hart, but I probably would have watched Stampede Wrestling, but I never got to know Bruce Hart like I've got to know him now. So thanks for asking me.
There you go. And Bruce, you're in the business probably 50 or so years. What are you proudest of?
There was a lot of aspects, I was as proud as anything of just kind of helping relaunch Stampede. There was a stretch there in the late 70s where my dad was pretty much had thrown in the towel, and he actually cut a deal to sell the business and was kind of about to kind of ride off into the sunset, and then the deal fell through. And right around that time, I had just come back from England, and my dad was kind of sure if he was even going to start again. And I told my dad I had run into this skinny, but I told him that he was exceptionally dynamic and talented guy named Dynamite Kid, and he proved to be kind of one of the major catalysts. And I think right at that time, Bret was just considering getting into the business, and all of a sudden, Bret, when Dynamite came in, Bret was kind of all of a sudden, wanting to get into it, and then that kind of ended up with a whole bunch of spin-offs with Davey Boy coming over a while later, and then my brother Owen and a lot of other young guys that were kind of equally kind of attracted, like Chris Benoit and Brian Pillman and Kichi Yamada, better known as Jushin Liger. And so it kind of it had a huge impact, although at the time when I first advocated my dad bringing Dynamite in, nobody ever saw it as much more than me, maybe, having some skinny little guy who ran over in England coming in, and nobody thought that he was even fit to be on the cards, much less becoming a game changer. So it was kind of an interesting.
I was sitting in Madison Square Garden in the early 80s, and Dynamite Kid and Tiger Mask come out. We didn't know what hit us. We were used to these big, lumbering, super heavyweights. And then these guys come out. They're doing moves we never saw. This was pre-internet.
Those are still great matches to watch today.
Yeah.
Those matches are still jaw-dropping. And
oh, yeah. They were, when I was in England, Tiger Mask was over there too. He was just kind of he was wrestling under the name of Sammy Lee or whatever, and everyone over in Japan called him Sayama. I'm not sure if that was his name, but that became kind of a cutting edge thing. And the funny thing was that when WWE first started kind of rating all the talent from Stampede and all, they were kind of looking down their nose at all what they referred to as the midgets, which was people like Dynamite and later on Benoit and Owen and Pillman and all like that. But at that time, that was the era of Andre the Giant and Big John Studd and Legion of Doom and Hulk Hogan and all like that. And they were far more into, that kind of mega look, and it was about 5 years later that those guys became kind of the, I think there was, I can't remember if there was some steroid scandal or whatever, but all of a sudden there was this, decision to kind of start going with more normal looking guys. And that proved to be kind of the big break for Bret, and kind of ended up with the Bulldogs getting a bigger push, and later on opened the door for all these other guys who have since become stars, people like Shawn Michaels and later on Daniel Bryan and CM Punks and Seth Rollins types. But Dynamite was kind of the guy who, kind of paved the way for a lot of those guys. So I was always happy that I had some influence on that, because at that time, North America, except for maybe Los Angeles, which had a few of the lucha types, the smaller Mexican guys down there, but there was a predomination of big guys, and size was a big factor. Almost all the big stars in the United States were big guys who were 240 pounds, and not necessarily that lively, but I was pleased that I had something to do with just kind of the way things evolved.
Oh, yeah. So here's a question that I have, and I've always wanted to ask, like someone that was involved in Canadian wrestling. What is it with Canadians? Just when you think of America, when America thinks of Canadians mostly, we think of you as all easygoing, nicer, friendlier versions of what we have here in the United States. Yet you guys have created some of the best wrestlers that, in your territories, create some of the best wrestlers in history. But what is it about Canada that turns people into great wrestlers?
I think there was a rich history, for years, like down in Montreal, they had a icons like Yvonne Robert and later on guys like the Vachons and the Dukes, and Toronto had a kind of its own niche there with Whipper Billy Watson and Lord Athol Leighton and that bunch. And I think one of the things that, as far as Calgary goes, my dad turned out an incredible number of guys. He had a lot of guys that were through the legendary dungeon, and they were ultimately kind of highly influential in American wrestling. People like Johnny Valentine, and he had a whole bunch of these guys that were early on in their careers, and they kind of went on to stardom in the States. But the impetus up here was at no point were we, and I certainly know when I was booking, at no point was I ever striving to be a cheap copy or whatever of what was going on in the United States. If anything, I was almost a little bit disdainful and almost kind of like I'm going to chart my own course here. And that was certainly the style back in the 80s with people like Dynamite and Pillman and Benoit and Owen and guys like that. They were all kind of striving to be a compelling alternative rather than trying to be the second coming of Hulk Hogan or whatever was kind of the mode down in the United States. And I'm glad I did that, because I think a lot of the other promotions in the States were trying to emulate all of that. And they came across in many ways as like a cheap imitation and didn't really set the world on fire.
Bob, you've been around the world for pro wrestling. Tell us some of the greatest matches you've ever seen, Bob.
Oh boy, actually my favorite match, and this is going way back when I was in Winnipeg. It was about 40 below zero, and they turned away 4,000 people at the old Winnipeg Arena.
40 below zero.
It was 40 below zero. Middle of January.
That was warm for Winnipeg, I might add.
Wow.
Anyway, they had a cage match with the Crusher versus Maurice Vachon.
Wow.
And I was very fortunate to having got a seat near ringside. And I remember that match. I loved the Crusher, and I got to know Maurice, and I and his brother Paul. He and I become very close friends. But that was one of my very favorite matches. One thing I do regret is having seen any really big major matches at Madison Square Garden. I'm very envious of you, Evan, when you've told me about some of those great matches with Bruno and no, I've seen a lot of pretty interesting matches, but.
Was there an appreciable difference, Evan, between Vince Sr. and Vince Jr.'s style, just the type of matches or anything like that?
Yeah, Vince Sr., we actually cared about the feuds. They mattered. Somebody would turn on Bruno or turn on Strongbow, and, the fans were emotionally involved. Jr. turned it into a cartoon where, it was just another night of entertainment, and it didn't have that same feel to it. Pretty much after the heel Piper era, I got bored with it, and I don't think I've seen 24 shows in 35 years since. I mean,
I would say the big difference is back then you had 5-minute promos and 20-minute matches, and now you have 20-minute promos and 5-minute matches.
Yeah.
And the 5-minute matches are, and here's the thing that I would like to go back to talking about Dynamite Kid and Tiger Mask. Those managed to be high impact, high intensity matches that were not spot fests. There was a balance. They built up to the high power moves. It's not that you were just seeing guys chopping and punching and strangling each other and doing eye rakes the entire time. They didn't have a lot of rest holds. The rest holds, if they had them, were still very physical. You would see those guys when they were doing the mat work. They were technicians to the highest degree. That's one of the things that I think the Hart family doesn't get enough credit for, is your level of expertise in bringing mat wrestling back and making people care about what was going on in the mat than instead of what was going on in the air. And you could do a build up to a finish that people believed instead of having these spot fests.
I was on many shows in WWE and I was doing some tours down there, and quite often there would be like a sold out crowd, but it was very weird. There was virtually no atmosphere. And I remember even when I did WrestleMania with that thing with Bret and Vince and I was the referee, a huge crowd there at the football stadium down in Phoenix, but at no time did I ever even feel like I was inspired by the audience. It was almost kind of like a weird feeling. Like I've been in front of, these packed little arenas in Calgary and Edmonton and other places. There's maybe 3,000 people and it's teeming with atmosphere. And I was down in Phoenix at that WrestleMania, and I didn't even at any time feel like the crowd was kind of an impetus to do anything. I was almost like, this is weird. There's 60, 70,000 people here, but I'm not really even feeling like they're, almost detached. There was little or no kind of, energy there. I didn't didn't get anything from them. It was just kind of a strange sensation.
And Evan, you'd asked me about some great matches. If I can tell you a couple of 2 or 3 really great matches in my memory before I forget. But I saw some absolute classic matches between Dynamite and Bruce. I saw some classic matches with Brian Pillman. One classic match at Stu Hart's 80th birthday in Calgary. It was Dory and Terry Funk in a blood fest against Brian Pillman and Bruce.
Wow.
And there was another great match, Owen and a guy named Mike Shaw, better known as Muck and Sing.
Bastion Booger.
Yes. Classic. And so there's some really classic matches when I start thinking about it. But,
yeah, that was one of the things that was, I've said it before, but it was one of the really disappointing aspects of my brother Owen's WWE career. At no time did I ever feel like they maximized his potential or used him the way he could have been. He was one of the best baby faces I've ever seen in my life. Maybe he had more appeal than Bret or any of those guys. And the whole time he was in WWE, they were putting him through all these kind of lame personas like the American Eagle and the Blue Blaze.
Teaming him up with Coco Beware wasn't so great. High Voltage,
yeah,
was that
high energy or whatever.
Yeah,
and I kept saying, geez, they're just wasting his talent. He was kind of like an earlier day version of a Daniel Bryan or a cross between Daniel Bryan and a Dynamite Kid. He was an incredible athlete and dynamic and had lots of charisma. And I kept seeing all these lame personas that they were having him do, where he was kind of like a whiny little crybaby and seemingly jealous of Bret. And at no point did they ever really come close to maximizing his potential. And it was kind of a tragic irony when he got killed. I heard that was one of the reasons that was put forward for his maybe having had that fatal accident was his blue blazer cape or whatever the hell got caught in the pulley, and it triggered the thing to release prematurely. I'm not sure if that's been verified or not, but I found myself saying, it's an ultimate tragic irony that they have him doing this lame gimmick, and maybe if that cape ended up causing him to get killed, it was kind of one more tragic aspect of the whole thing. And my dad was he sort of felt similarly about that, and felt that at no time should Owen have ever even been coming to the ring on a cable anyway. Had nothing to do with wrestling, and it was kind of a ill-conceived pointless thing. And I think my dad said many a time it was tragic that Owen got killed, but he would have been less angry about it if it had been during the course of an actual wrestling thing rather than some kind of frivolous bullshit thing where he's just coming to the ring in a bird costume on a cable. You know, the whole thing seemed like it was a sad irony.
I'm really sorry to hear that. My own brother is named Owen, so the loss of Owen Hart is something that is still felt by millions of people, and I just hope that you and your family understand that there's people that really still miss Owen Hart a lot and wish he were still around every day. And he touched a lot of us. He may not have gotten the top billing that Bret got, but for a lot of people, the Owen Hart is missed as much as any of the other wrestlers that have gone.
Oh yeah, that was one of the things I really was greatly impressed with when they had the funeral up here. It was sad and all like that, but just the turnout and the genuine kind of outpouring of emotions for Owen. I know it meant a lot to me and meant a lot to my parents that virtually all the wrestlers, not just from WWE but from any other promotions, there was a whole bunch of other people up here like the Dory Funks and Terry Funks, and it was kind of a really nice tribute and kind of just an outpouring of love and respect for Owen, and I suppose to some degree Stu as well. Just kind of. But yeah, it was funny. I saw these people even that I had never seen in years, like Fritz von Erich's wife and Kevin von Erich and Dorian Terry and a bunch of these people that were big stars in their own right, and they all were most humble and respectful. And I saw them all down in the dungeon. That was almost like some kind of a pilgrimage. After the funeral, I saw, if you were a wrestling fan, that would have been kind of some special kind of thing, because I saw all these people from Hulk Hogan, who I think was not even in the WWE at that time. He was in NWO or whatever. And
WCW, yes.
Dory and Terry Funk and all these blasts from the past, and they were all kind of down there and just touching the walls of the dungeon and all like that. But I know it meant a lot to my dad. It was kind of, quite kind of gratifying. And I had my dad, Vince McMahon, and some of those people were up there, and I give Vince McMahon credit for coming up there, and I think it was one of the first things my dad said to him when he saw him up there. He said, I don't envy you, or I wouldn't want to be in your shoes right now, and I think he, from a fellow promoter's perspective, understood, how bad he would have felt if he had maybe orchestrated something like that, and say maybe Shane McMahon had maybe met with a similar fate or whatever. But it was interesting in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, just touching here quickly, at the funeral, I'm in the lobby at Stu's house, and this young guy comes up to me and he says, "Can you tell me where the dungeon is?" And I turned around, it was our old friend Hunter Hurst. So I took Hunter and China and Luna Vachon on a grand tour of the dungeon. We spent about 20 minutes in the dungeon, and I took him on an entire tour of Stu Hart's house. I don't know if he remembers me, but I remember that he was very amiable. Those people really appreciated the tour of the dungeon.
Oddly enough, Hunter's mentor, Killer Kowalski, was a mainstay and was up in Calgary for a long time, and he was down in the dungeon many a time, and it was a big part of our promotion back in the late 50s, early 60s. So that was kind of interesting, if only because Hunter was hugely influenced by Killers. So.
Bruce, I know you're not a big fan of WWE, but who do you enjoy watching today? Whether it's WWE or AEW or New Japan, who do you enjoy seeing today?
I actually like. I've long been a big fan of Daniel Bryan. Seth Rollins is another guy that's kind of a throwback type, and I actually enjoy Roman Reigns. You know, I knew his dad quite well way back when FMCK broke up here, but he always seems like he's trying pretty hard, and I'm not sure if he's part of WWE anymore, but I always liked CM Punk. I thought that he kind of did it right, and I actually enjoyed Hunter. You know, I always liked Hunter's intensity, and I always thought he was, doing his best, and in some ways it wasn't that easy. You know, there's a lot of kind of unnecessary kind of criticism of him just being Vince's son-in-law and all like that. But I always thought he had a pretty good approach. So those are some of the ones I liked. A lot of the guys in the past that were, its own way. I enjoyed Hulk Hogan, if only because he was kind of successful. You can't deny that, and he was kind of a whatever he did, he stuck to that, and wasn't the thing I liked about Hulk. You never saw him trying to do a drop kick or a nip up or a cartwheel. You know, he stuck to whatever.
It was like a Big Mac. It wasn't very good, but you got the same thing every time. You knew you were going to get the same thing, and no matter where you went or whatever opponent he was going to go up against, you'd see the big boot.
I had a lot of respect for old Bob Backlund too. You know, that was. Vince Senior's man, not Vince Junior's, but anytime I talked to Bob, I always found he defended the business and had a lot of pride in what he was doing, and I think he was just kind of endeavoring to oblige Vince Senior, and give him credit. It seemed to serve the purpose. So
I think, Bruce, you were quite a fan of Randy Orton.
I liked all the Ortons, and another Randy I liked very much was Randy Savage. I give him and I liked all the Ortons, Bob Jr. and Randy, and they were old school, and Randy Savage, I might add, was almost kind of like a refreshing alternative to Hulk Hogan. They're like the two polar opposites, but I loved the style that Randy Savage had. He was kind of old school and a bit of a renegade. And I think a lot of the fans out there probably don't know, but Randy Savage was born up in Calgary. His dad was Angelo Poffo, and he was working for my dad extensively back in the 50s. And so I was too young to recall when he was born, but I remember talking to him and Lanny on numerous occasions, and they were always actually pretty nice guys. Lanny especially is a pretty nice guy, and they had a lot of Calgary stories, and Angelo and Stu and Helen, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, Fritz von Erich was breaking in around that time for my dad, and he and his wife Doris had a trailer in the yard, and so it's interesting, some of the evolutions that kind of evolved out of, guys my dad had up here in the 50s, even guys like Fritz and the Miller brothers and the Scott brothers, and quite a few of them, and Gene Kiniski, of course, so it's interesting just to reflect on how many of them. Tully Blanchard was another that his dad broke in around that same time with Wilbur Snyder and Gene Kiniski, and they were kind of football players. So interesting, some of the evolutions.
So Bruce, as a little kid, when you'd walk out of the house and see these giants, these football players, wrestlers, as a little kid, 3-4 years old, did you realize, what were you thinking when you saw these guys?
It's very strange. I've said it a few times before, but my dad, we kind of lived out on the outskirts of the city in kind of some kind of a quasi farm or something like that. And I remember there was all these bizarre looking characters. There were a few neighbors, most of whom were farmers and type, but they would see this weekly procession. Every Saturday, the wrestlers would come up to get their paychecks, and my dad never had them ready on time, but the wrestlers would all be hanging around the yard for like 5-6 hours. And at the same time, there was a bunch of animals in the yard, like goats and cows and chickens. And my dad had some affiliation with some guy he was my dad's partner in the wrestling up at Edmonton, and he had started a big zoo up there. And so every now and then you'd see these other animals like zebras and ostriches and stuff.
Yeah.
I always used to reflect on the neighbors, and some of the kids at school used to liken us to a bizarre cross between the Beverly Hillbillies and the Addams Family, where you had all weird-looking characters like bald-headed lady wrestlers and black guys with blonde hair like Sweet Daddy Siki, and monsters and giants and blimps, and then you had these animals roaming around the yard, and everyone kind of thought those guys are really strange, you know.
I've got a question that I'd like for both you and Bob to sort of talk about between the two of you. Why do you think Stampede had one of the greatest semblances of talent that you could possibly get, and yet look at the fate of what happened to the wrestlers that were involved, and how many of them were so star-crossed and unfortunately met with tragic ends? Do you think
that was very strange? You know, I've often pondered, you know, one of the strange parts is like some of the ones you mentioned, like Davey Boy and Brian Pillman and Chris Benoit and quite a few others, and none of them seem to be the prototypical druggy types in retrospect. Like, I don't recall any of them being really potheads or, you know, getting high on acid or any of that stuff. But it was a sad irony that so many of them nonetheless met with, you know, kind of tragic outcomes, you know, like Pillman, like Benoit, like Owen, like a few of the others, you know. And I often reflected on that, you know, whether it was just kind of tragic fate or what, you know. But there was, you guys probably know my dad, but my dad was the antithesis of anything to do with drugs. He was adamant about, you know, he thought marijuana was abhorrent, and you know, everything else he was unthinkable to him, like LSD or heaven forbid heroin, or, you know.
What about the painkillers? What about painkillers?
He was adamant about all that too, you know, and that seemed to be something that seemed to evolve or become more of a prevalent problem in the 80s and 90s. Then, you know, every now and then I'd hear back in the 60s, 70s of some wrestlers dying of a drug overdose and stuff, but it seemed to be kind of reaching epidemic proportions in the 80s and 90s. And I might add that I think the lifestyle, you know, or the whatever in WWE was more conducive to being able to indulge in drugs than I know back in the 70s and 80s when I was breaking in. There was a lot less opportunity, you know, and just the style. We were on the road all the time, and everyone was kind of around everyone else. And if you were stoned or wasted or messed up, everyone would kind of know it. And most of the time it was obligatory for everyone to take a turn at the wheel driving on those long road trips and all. So obviously you couldn't be stoned or whatever if you were driving. And But and I was in a lot of other territories, and I didn't really notice too much. You know, I'd hear certain territories seem to have a little more kind of indulgence. Like Dallas seemed to be something tied in with the Von Erichs and stuff like that. And you'd hear every now and then of a certain wrestlers like King Curtis or some of them that were maybe potheads and all, but it's unfortunate. It's become far more of a, kind of a prevailing problem in the business. And I've often said that it's because there's wrestlers in WWE, you have two variables, time and money. They have way more time on their hands and they have way more money. And the other thing that maybe lends to the usage of drugs is some of the matches are so kind of scripted and watered down that, in WWE, I see these guys going out and doing their 10, 15-minute kind of walkthrough without really doing anything. It's all pretty scripted and canned, and so it almost allows them or enables them to get away with being stoned and stuff like that, or even if they are stoned, the fans almost think it's part of their persona. But back in the day, I don't think a lot of those guys would have ever been able to work for a guy like my dad or a Vern Gagne or maybe an Eddie Graham and some of those guys if they were kind of under the influence. And that's, I think, something that needs to be addressed. And I'm honestly not sure if it has been addressed, or I still suspect. And I think the other element that you guys are all well aware of that's kind of contributed in its own inadvertent way is anabolic usage, where it's almost kind of, if nothing else, invited a lot of injuries. A lot of guys getting, torn ligaments and stuff because their bodies are too big for, their frame or whatever. And then they're taking painkillers to offset some of those injuries. And it becomes kind of a vicious cycle. But it's something that I guess has become, part of a lot of sports right now, just this kind of ill-conceived kind of hybrid of performance-enhancing drugs and then stuff like cocaine and all like that as well, and I think Evan would probably relate. He's an old baseball fan and all, but back in the day, there was a few drunks and stuff in Major League Baseball, but for all intents and purposes, it was mostly just they were drunks. They weren't, I think, snorting coke and any of that other stuff. And it's become, I guess, just maybe complicit part of society in general. I don't know.
Bob, what are your thoughts?
I found it interesting when Chris Benoit broke into Stampede Wrestling. I remember Chris was a young guy, about 12 years old, and he came down with his dad every week. Nice, quiet young man, and but he loved the Dynamite Kid, and he used to come up to, when can I get in? I want to break in, and very polite and quiet, and he used to. I think I only saw him drink 2 beers in my life, and but he was so quiet and just a cool guy, and went on a lot of road trips with a lot of guys. I used to drive separately sometime, and a lot of the guys said, "Can I drive with you?" So I remember Chris and I, he and I used to drive quite a bit, and always really quiet. And but I don't know what happened. It seems that when a lot of those guys left and went to the big companies, I don't know if it was just, as Bruce said, it was conducive to there was an opportunity or something. I don't know, but
I've often wondered if WWE. I know I was in both ends of it, and I would be acutely aware of whether guys were stoned or, it didn't take too much to kind of, sense when guys were, whether they're even just smoking pot or whatever. But I would have to think, maybe I'm wrong, but I would have to think those running the show in WWE must have some, kind of suspicion or, ability to discern whether these guys are stoned or wasted or messed up. It's for them to be at the point where they're actually dying from the stuff. At some point, somebody should be able to say, and I'm not sure. I don't profess to know how they even test these guys or whatever, but it would seem to me that if they were really striving to get rid of it, you test every guy every damn day if it requires that, and at some point, you should be able to kind of eliminate it and, kind of, make the appropriate moves if you need to. But I don't know. There's something I'm always puzzled when they all make out like we never had any idea so-and-so was ever indulging in that thing. Say what? Who are you guys kidding?
Buddy.
Yeah. So what do you think the future of wrestling holds? We already have the challenge of all these other things going on, but now that trying to put people together in an arena, trying to do independent shows, as I used to be involved in, and even trying to do shows on the bigger level, like you're seeing with the WWE and AEW.
I believe, if wrestling's going to survive and thrive and reinvent itself, I think they need to go back to square one. I don't like to use a cliche. I think they need to revitalize wrestling at the grassroots level. That was one of the biggest problems WWE has done. They've in their infinite wisdom back in the 80s and 90s, they essentially eliminated all these territories like Calgary and Portland and Amarillo and Minneapolis and Florida and Oklahoma and all. And that was where all the talent was coming from, but it was also fostering the grassroots of our business. Nowadays, if and when WWE comes to Calgary, it's maybe once a year or something like that. And all too often, it's just kind of a sterile walkthrough anyway, if it's not a TV taping or a damn pay-per-view. The wrestlers just kind of go out and go through the motions, and it's a non-event, and most of the fans walk out of there kind of feeling almost like, geez, that wasn't what I was expecting. And I think if the same had happened in any other sport, if, say, Major League Baseball had, in its infinite wisdom back in the 1920s or something, decided that they needed to get rid of minor league baseball, it was competition to them or whatever, it would have served the same purpose. Or if the NFL decided that college football and high school football were some kind of a threat. And I think WWE needs to, reimagine their whole approach. And if I were they, I'd be endeavoring to interact and support and kind of help some of these indie promotions, kind of easier said than done, and some of the indie promotions need to raise their game too. I don't like to be critical of them, but most of them are an abomination and conceived, a bunch of guys in bad outfits with skinny girls with fake boobs masquerading as managers, and everything's kind of, they need to kind of reinvent the wheel, so to speak. And I'm not sure if that's a possibility or not. It would require a lot of kind of thinking and kind of applying some, principles and kind of that kind of thing. But I think it needs to be they really need to reevaluate the whole thing if it's going to succeed. I think it'll always be around. It'll be like cockroaches or something like that. But I don't know whether it will ever kind of regain, the mantle that it once had,
Interesting.
And Bob, tell us about Heartbeat Radio.
Yeah, we've Heartbeat Radio. We've had around 350 shows of Heartbeat Radio. We've got the top 55, and we'll probably get a few more. The top 50 or 55 are on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. And now we've tried something a little different where we open up. We had 2 or 3 shows last month. We found with the COVID deal, and it's a little awkward getting scheduling right now. So we're going to open up again and relaunch it in October. And we're doing, we did it on a thing called StreamYard, something like we're doing today. I actually like the Skype. It's way better than, no disrespect. We had seemed to have had a lot of problem with that other deal, but it's a nice part about this format. I think Zoom meetings help. Everybody seems to be doing this type of format. When we used to do Blog Talk Radio, you'd have a guest on, you'd think, wow, we're going to have thousands of people listen. And then you look at the stats and say, holy, it's going to take us a year to get that figure. And then you might have, we had this one old guy, Evan, I think that you may have watched him wrestle, Ole Anderson.
Sure.
Ole Anderson.
Ole Anderson came on Heartbeat Radio, and I think we had about 1 year, we had about 500 listens to his show. And there's we had to do some editing in there too. Anyway, they decided to put that up on YouTube. Right now it's up to 45,000 listens. And there's another one we had, Ken Patera. Nobody wanted to listen to it on Blog Talk Radio. We had a few hundred. So we decided to put Ken Patera's interview up, and he's about 9,900 listens. But we had a really good show a few years ago. Terry Funk's 70th birthday. It was 70th birthday. His 70th birthday, and we had Terry came on, and we brought on some surprise people calling in.
Ric
Flair, J.J. Dillon, Harley, and Dave Meltzer. That's up on the YouTube, and it's got a few thousand listens too. But we found that when we started doing this new format, it might get 1,000 people listen to it in the first time, and so it's easier to promote. But we're kind of new at it. We're trying to get the kinks out and everything. But we have our own YouTube channel, and we're gonna gradually get the thing going again. And probably, I figure late September, early October, you'll see us back. And I know we had Evan was actually scheduled to be on our show tomorrow, but we had to. Evan, we'd love to have you and Russell join us as one of our very first new shows in October.
That'd be great.
You guys on a regular basis, just because
I'd be honored. I'd be absolutely honored to be able to be on your show. In fact, tell our listeners how they can tune into it in October. What should they be looking for?
Okay, well, we're going to have we have the Heartbeat on. We called it the Heartbeat Radio. Now we just changed the name to the Heartbeat with Bruce Hart, and we have Bruce's, of course, now back on Facebook. In order for us to share the StreamYard, we had to do it through Facebook Live, and so we do an Facebook Live and the YouTube. We upload everything onto Bruce Hart's page and my page, and whoever wants to share it. And so it'll be on our YouTube channel in October. And we have another guy out of Portland Wrestling who's been helping us. But right now we're just kind of getting the kinks out. We want to, hopefully October will be a perfect time to relaunch it again. And we've had so many guests on. We've had, I don't even want to say who wasn't on the show. There's a few guys we've had on there, and some guys, almost most of the guys we had on the show we really liked. One time we had a Don Leo Jonathan. I saw him at the Cauliflower Alley Club and said, "Don Leo, would you like to come on to Heartbeat Radio sometime?" So Don Leo called up and he said, "Bob."
He spoke really slow.
He said, "I talk very slow. Do you want 15 minutes?" I said, "Well, whatever, 15, or if you can go a half an hour." The first day he went 3 hours.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, he's had 3 words.
And then he said, I said, "Would you like, we ran out of airtime. Can you come back again?" So he said, "I promise you I won't talk as long next time." So I came back on about 3 weeks or a month later, 3 more hours. So
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, he is a legend. Yeah.
But that was one legend, and there we had this one old Don Fargo was on the show one time. He was quite a character. A lot of guys like Dick Byers, a lot of those guys who passed away, we're very fortunate to have got them on our show. And Dick, the Destroyer, was one of our favorite guests. Another one of our favorite guests was an old friend of Bruce and myself, is Hillbilly Jim. And Bruce can
talked about him last week.
About Hillbilly when he broke in here, Bruce.
Hillbilly, as you guys know, is anything but what the character that they had him playing. You know, he's actually went to Georgetown University and was quite articulate and quite personable. But he's got an excellent perspective. You know, I think that's one of the reasons why he's been there as long as he has. He never really gets caught up in the crossfire of the politics and all, but he's seen all these guys at their best and their worsts, the Vinces and the Pat Pattersons and the, Hulk Hogan's and all like that. And he's actually got a pretty good eye for kind of interesting little anecdotal things. And so he's been a great guest. And I've had quite a few of these other ones that were, wives of iconic guys, like Bruiser Brody's wife's been a great guest, Barbara Goodish, and Charlie Thez was wife of Lou Thez. And I consider myself lucky that I've been around the business long enough that I can engage these people. You actually have to have been around a bit. Otherwise, you can't just have a conversation with somebody if you don't know anything whatsoever about the wrestling business or some of these iconic people and situations. So I consider myself fortunate. I was around it all my life, and I was always listening intently when my dad and some of these other guys were, when I was a little kid, I'd be listening to people like my dad and Lou Thez and Dr. Jerry Graham and all these guys. And I was fascinated with just some of the stories and the, some of the bizarre characters and the debauchery and all the other, and the behind the scenes of the non-wrestling things were probably more compelling and fascinating than a lot of what was going on in the ring. And so
we had Heartbeat Radio. We had a great involvement with 3 organizations: the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame in Wichita Falls, Texas, run by Johnny Mantell; the Cauliflower Alley Club in Las Vegas, run by Brian Blair; and the Waterloo Dan Gable Museum and in Waterloo, Iowa. Pretty well. That's not. I know they changed the. We had a guy, Kyle Kligman, was involved with this new guy, Jim Miller, really good guy, and.
Yeah, I've been honored that we've had a guy like Dan Gable, who's amongst amateur wrestling types, one of the ultimate icons, and he was kind enough to, spend time with us, and it's interesting to get perspectives from people like him and Cale Sonnen and some of those guys that were kind of the ultimate in the amateur wrestling realm, but oddly enough, big supporters of pro wrestling. Most people would have trouble believing that Dan Gable's, a huge pro wrestling fan, and he's got a Hall of Fame down there in Waterloo with all these pro wrestlers that are part of it, including my dad and Lou Thez and Kurt Angle and all these guys. So, but yeah, it's been fascinating for a lot of reasons.
And the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame, and I don't know, Evan, if you had a chance to attend it when it was down in Amsterdam, New York.
Yeah, I was there several times up in Amsterdam. I haven't been to the Texas one yet.
I thought I saw you down there back when Tony Villano.
Yeah, you were down there, Bruce. I think we
I never knew what transpired there. All of a sudden it seemed to be it was up in not far from Cooperstown, New York, and then next thing I know, it's been moved to Texas.
I don't know the politics, but
no, I can imagine
like
it'd be about like the Baseball Hall of Fame moving to Galveston or something like that. It's not in Cooperstown anymore.
The thing I remember about that Amsterdam most is Darren and Tola drove Bruce and myself to Cooperstown. So I can say I've actually been to what an amazing museum that is in upstate New York. And I think you guys went to the boxing museum right near there too. So
near Syracuse.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, we're about out of time for today's session. So I really appreciate your time and everything. You guys have been amazing guests. So much information, and we'd love to have you on in a future show. Plus, I'd love to be on your show.
I'd be delighted. I've said it to Evan many times. I wish there was a hell of a lot more guys like him, in our business, because it would be an infinitely better shape. There's a huge dearth of, quality, people chronicling our history, and that's one of the reasons I'm concerned about its kind of future. But if there was more Evan Ginzburgs out there, we'd all be a hell of a lot better shape. So
I appreciate that. And in ProWrestlingStories.com, I did a very long interview with Bruce Hart, and if you want to learn more about Bruce, it's a nice piece. We also ran that in the Cauliflower Alley newsletter as well. So ProWrestlingStories.com.
Evan, just before we go, I've got to do this movie here. This is my favorite wrestling movie of all time.
Thank you so much.
350 Days. We have it now on Crave TV in Canada. I can watch it anytime. I've watched it several times. The other movie, and no disrespect to Paradise Alley, I loved that when I had it in my theater. But The Wrestler is my choice of being, that's the best movie I've seen on wrestling.
Thank you.
You're the man in charge of that, so great show.
I was part of it. Any movie's a big team, but thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we really appreciate you having you on the show, and we'll have you on again very soon, especially maybe right before October, or right as you debut your new radio show.
Okay.
Your new podcast.
Love to have you back anytime.
Okay.
Thank you, Bruce Hart and Bob Johnson, King of Men. Thank you, guys.
See you all next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.